Thank you very much, Acting Secretary, the Speaker of the National Assembly, other presiding officers, the Chairperson, Deputy Chairperson of Sanef, senior journalists, ladies and gentlemen. Luzuku is looking at me because I said to him, I always get nervous when there are journalists. And that is not because I do wrong things. It is perhaps because Matata was married to one journalist at a particular time. And he's alive in Atteridgeville. But I've been asked to speak about our first 100 days. And when they said that, I actually got shocked. Is it 100 days already? And the speaker said, no, I think we are in our 5th or 6th month already. I said, it can't be. Because we must admit that it has been an exciting, sometimes hectic time for us who sit and preside over the houses. But I think if you are a multi-party democratic person, you will also say, clearly, the 5th Parliament is different from the 1st Parliament. Clearly, there is energy which we are hoping, because those of us who are older must look at ways of harnessing this excess energy into more constructive, representative modes on behalf of the constituencies. So we've done what we think we were sent to do. We were elected. That's the first thing. We were expected to set up committees of parliament. We have done so. We didn't have anything. We had to ensure that the constitutional committees and other legislated upon committees are set. They're all in place. We had to, as the NCOP, wait until the president had pronounced and then have this tedious job of trying to cluster the NCOP into select committees that mirrored. The NA had an easier job because what they do is a portfolio committee shadows a particular ministry and a department, that's it. With us, it is a little bit more complicated. And again, another thing which is interesting about the 5th Parliament is that if you go back to the 4th Parliament, it had retained at least 60% of the old members. So it was less hectic in establishing and in induction. The 5th Parliament, the NA has 50% new people. The NCOP has 86%. Now, 86% of 54 people is a hell of a lot of new faces who needs to be inducted, who have to be trained. That, again, brings us to where, as the presiding officers, we've had to reflect on, and we have addressed parties on this matter. The parliamentary high turnover does not really help us retain the skills we need. It does not help us sharpen the skills that we think we have built already, because your MP must be able to understand the systems in the departments, to know exactly which question they must ask for financial and administrative oversight. So we've been worried, but we have had to then sit back and assess. Is it an advantage? In the NCOP, we now are relaxed. We think, in fact, it is an advantage because we represent, in fact, the 3 spheres of government. The fact that 86% of us were new forced us to train and retrain and retrain. I think after the first 2 sittings, we went back to the drawing board, took us all back into saying, and this is how you start to write a motion in the House. And if I say I'm not giving you the 5th round of supplementary questions, it is because this rule book says. And therefore, we have had a relatively, and I don't want to jinx it, a relatively peaceful time in the NCOP than my colleagues have in the National Assembly. So we have inducted members of parliament on time. We have set up committees on time. We have set up the most important committee, the Ethics and Members' Interest Committee. We are proud to say that members were given and returned their declaration forms in time. We are happy to say that we set up all the joint committees. We came out with programs of both houses and the joint program. And I'm sure it is common knowledge that there are only 2 instances where Parliament has not executed its agreed to program. It is one to represent South Africa at an international conference of the Commonwealth Parliamentarians Association. And that is not because there was anything funny. It was because we were in the middle of the budget process in both houses. And we felt that it was too important for us to sit in throughout that process. The second instance where we will say that we tried and we didn't conclude, it is during question time of the President in the National Assembly. In the Council of Provinces, we have ticked all the boxes. We have gone through training sessions and strategic planning sessions. We are actually right in the middle of bringing together now the sessions from the National Assembly and the NCOP so that we then produce by October, before it ends, we are saying, so help us God, the strategic plan of Parliament and the annual reports. It is important for us to point this out because even though we come fresh from a budget, that budget is actually a caretaker budget. It is a carryover from the last Parliament. And therefore, whatever it is that we are strategizing about will only see its expression in the next budget. So we are very serious about it. For the NCOP, we have interrogated our mandate in the Constitution. We actually think that we've not been too assertive as the House, because we are the only House, as I say, that represents all spheres. But we are also the only House that actually has direct mandate to intervene. Section 100, Section 139, Section 154. And of course, the Constitution says that we should bring in a piece of legislation which will facilitate these interventions. And therefore, we are looking at the drafting of such legislation. Parliament as a whole has looked at the 20 years of lawmaking, and we are agreed that we need to then set up a multi-party task team that will work with the legislative review of Parliament. We also think that when you get into the 5th Parliament, obviously with the energy that we have, you have to be on your toes, and we are happy that people are putting us on our toes, frankly. We are looking very seriously at the capacity that we need as the NCOP. I said that we are structured a little bit more complicatedly than the NA, and therefore our research and content advice capacity has to be improved. We are looking at making sure that at the end of the term, we don't hemorrhage too much, but if we do hemorrhage, you do not have former members of Parliament who are desperate. And therefore, a project which the Speaker started when she was the Speaker in the 3rd Parliament, with the European Union Fund of ensuring that academically we also help capacitate the members. We are taking it on. She has also spoken to the need of space. We are terribly squeezed. When we were doing our last training for the committees, I think we spent more than 100,000 renting space for the meeting, 2 days in one hotel. And therefore the issue of space is important, not only for members of parliament. It is also important because even your public, your staff members are squeezed. We just don't have office space. And therefore we are saying that you can't stand up as parliament and say, and Labour and the employer in the private sector must ensure that there is job satisfaction, and then we fail to provide the same. So we are looking into that. We also want to quicken our steps, sharpen ourselves on oversight. But oversight and democracy only make sense if your structures are functional. So we're looking at structures. Oversight and democracy only thrive when the rule of law is there, and therefore we're beginning to relook, and it is also a project which was handed over to us by the former presiding officers, that of reviewing all the rules of the NCOP, the rules of the NA, and the joint rules. So that is something that we are in the process of doing, so that at all times Parliament is alive to the current conditions. We are also taking the route that says the organized municipality is a permanent but non-voting member of the NCOP. We've had several interactions with them. They have raised certain issues, and we think that we are also in a good space as Parliament to mediate between the different spheres and the executive. So we are going to be getting into that space, to give that space to the two, I don't want to say warring, I want to say that the two different levels of government which might have disputes. We also think that Parliament must be a place which continues to mirror the interests of our people, and therefore we've been questioning ourselves on our role as public representatives. Constitution says the Parliament must be representative. And we're trying to internalize, what does it mean? Does it only mean that you must come from Vryburg and Johannesburg and Khanyesa and Kutonsi? What does it mean? Does it mean that all the genders and all the races and all the cultures and religions must be in Parliament? How far do you take that? It says that we must also promote a participatory democracy. Does it mean that our public hearings are the beginning and the end? So we're trying to look as this new Parliament in how we just balance the imperatives of the Constitution, the promises that we've made in our mandates, and the reality that a public representative has a responsibility to represent. I think that we're hoping that after this meeting person to person, Lezuko, we might find it easier to talk. We, as the presiding officers, all of us, our doors are open. Sometimes we read about Parliament and we think we should just have been asked a question. We could have explained a rule. We could have explained a structure. And what is out there feeding the public is sometimes a misrepresentation. So we are saying that we are open. We think that all of us by the funniest coincidence. The 4 presiding officers are all divorcees, so they've got a little bit more time. The house chairs are a different matter. They are the opposite of all of us. But the fact of the matter, he's engaged to a new one, so he must not. I am saying that we will find the time. We are available. We will find the patience. All of us are mothers. No, we will find the time, because until South Africa understands the role of Parliament, then we are in trouble. Some journalist says, these presiding officers are old things. They just chuck people out. The fact of the matter is that when you preside, you are forced to be impartial. You are forced because the rules say. You are forced because this member, it doesn't matter how annoying they might be representing a voice out there in the community that must find expression in the House. And that voice, it doesn't matter how annoying it might be to my person. I am forced to apply the rules, and apply the rules equally to members of whatever party. So we try to be. I am saying that we're not angels. And sometimes, I know I have received a note or two from one very stern member of the ruling party. You are smiling, you are supposed to look stern. But sometimes we are just human, and sometimes what happens there, you find yourself laughing, and sometimes you find yourself annoyed. But when we are annoyed, we are not supposed to show it. We are supposed to protect every speaker in the House. But equally so, we are not supposed to protect even the wrong things when the decorum of the House is really now being jeopardized. And so we had a meeting as presiding officers, the 4 of us. And we said, sometimes we think the point of orders are meant, especially to the 2 female presiding officers, are meant to intimidate. And we shall not be intimidated, because these are 2 grandmothers also, you know. When you've had children, sometimes you get used to, let me just take it a little mild, let me stretch my patience, because in that stretching of the patience, you've got to accommodate that voice that is very real out there. It might be confused, it might even confuse you, but it is a voice in the constituency in this country that needs to be allowed to move. And therefore, we are hoping that this excitement in Parliament can only work to strengthen us, strengthen our rules, strengthen the democracy, push us forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. I think this platform allows us, my bosses are still laughing at the fact that the chairperson declared that they are all very free. Now I understand why we get called at 11 p.m. At 4 a.m. we asked to come to the office. Yeah, and I'm so happy that we had this forum. Yeah, you get called at awkward hours and not have an excuse and come into the office and do work, and we leave very late. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I understand very well. As I said, we will have an opportunity to have some interaction, and I do want to reiterate that this is not a media briefing. I do want to also encourage all of us to possibly look at some areas that you'd like to pursue into the future. And Luzuko will be able to facilitate after today any interface that any of us as journalists would like to pursue. So what the presiding officers are trying to do is just to map the themes and unveil some of the corners of Parliament that some of us might not be aware of unless you get into that precinct, all you think is plenary. But there's quite a lot of work that's happening in committees, and us as officials are really pushed to produce documents at times, giving short notice to do that. And I think the presiding officers have also shared that we do have an interface with the International Parliamentary Union, and that's also a platform where you meet other international democratic parliaments, whom when you go to those forums, you realize that the democratic parliaments of the world are facing the same challenges that South African parliament is facing. And it's also fascinating when we interface with officials in those parliaments, and we share notes and make presentations, and find that, in fact, South Africa is quite ahead. The IPU in particular has actually copied or was assisted by South Africa to establish and to produce what you call a strategic plan for a 5-year electoral period. So we participate in those forums, and I think this is some of the content that we should share with yourselves over time. At this point in time, I do want to invite Mr. Makudu Sifara, the Sanef Deputy Chairperson. So I see quite a number of familiar faces from my GCIS life, and he's one of those. Thank you.